Bob Woodward's new book, sparking a firestorm in Washington and beyond. The White House pushing back, disputing some characterizations in the book. I spoke to Bob Woodward earlier. All right, Bob, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
On the Daily Briefing. I want to start by playing some sound from you over the weekend on CBS Sunday Morning.
You look at the operation of this White House, and you have to say, let's hope to God we don't have a crisis. People better wake up to what's going on.
And what struck me by that is that, do you think people are not aware of what's going on?
Well, I think this book shows in meticulous detail what happens at specific meetings, where the issues are addressed by President Trump and his staff: foreign affairs, North Korea, Afghanistan, the Middle East, all of the immigration, trade issues. And so in the coverage of Trump and the focus a number of people have had on the, and I think rightly, on the Mueller investigation, that's been the center of gravity.
Mm-hmm.
I think you need to measure a presidency by what actually is done on the issues that affect people.
There's been several people have come out and said this book is inaccurate. This is not a new accusation, right? You've heard this before, and you've answered and said it's all accurate, or you have the notes to back it up. But what about for some of those people that have decided to talk to you? Do they get more favorable treatment in a book?
I am able, and I have the time to actually vet it and make sure that these are the descriptions of what occurred. But some of these statements by people, I call it kind of a politically calculated survival denial. It's very much like the non-denial denial.
Right, they complain a little bit about that it was out of context, or it was misrepresenting their experience. That was what Rob Porter said.
Yes, and actually I believe that it does, but these things get washed out as time moves on. The former editor of the Washington Post, Ben Bradley, used to always say the truth emerges. Often it takes a great deal of time. 4
people are quoted extensively in the book: Steve Bannon, Reince Priebus, Rob Porter, and Gary Cohn. But those 4 are no longer there. There is one person who's quoted quite extensively in the book that I read over the weekend. That is Chief of Staff John Kelly, and he is still there. And here's one of the quotes in the book. John Kelly sees Gary Cohn in the cabinet room after Gary Cohn has said, look, I'm going to resign because of the Charlottesville statements. And in the book it says, on the way out of the Oval Office, General Kelly, who has heard it all, pulled Cohn into the cabinet room. According to notes that Cohn made afterward, Kelly said, that was the greatest show of self-control I have ever seen. If that were me, I would have taken that resignation letter and shoved it up his 6 different times. I spoke to a source close to the White House, and I'm told that this is what they told me, in quotes. They couldn't believe the Kelly quotes, that they weren't surprised about the other 4, but that the Kelly quotes really surprised them, and that the president is very unhappy with General Kelly, and the Chief of Staff, that they feel betrayed. And the other thing they said is that they had heard Kelly say something like this about Cohn, or that they'd heard this story before. And so there seems to be now, because of the book, some distrust between President Trump and Chief of Staff John Kelly. Would that surprise you?
Well, I don't know. I haven't done reporting on it. But again, the things that Chief of Staff Kelly talked about and what he did, I mean, there are very interesting points in the book where he sits down and he issues some orders and he says, we are no longer going to make on-the-fly decisions. We are going to make sure that there is a process, a vetting of decisions, and no decision that the president makes is final until there is a formal decision memo. And of course,
that rankled some people.
Yeah, and it didn't last. And so, you know, there is an effort on the part of General Kelly to get some control here. And as anyone who has worked for Trump knows, and I think the book establishes this also, that very hard to control Trump.
Yeah. How would this book have been different if President Trump had talked to you for it?
I would have included what he had to say. Last month, he called me and said, gee, I would have liked to have talked to you, and he didn't understand why it didn't happen.
If he offered you an interview now, would you take it?
Well, the book is already out, maybe for the second book.
Is there going to be a second book?
Well, who knows?
What will be the title of that book?
It's a very good question.
I can imagine a couple of things. I do know that the president's very...
People have suggested alternative titles for this book, like Zoo Without Walls, which is one of the quotes from the former chief of staff.
Oh, right, with Reince Priebus saying that it's like predators inside the White House. I do want to ask you this, because the president's very frustrated that his message can't get out, or that the results aren't being reported, that he's not getting enough credit for things that have happened. This book really covers the first year, and that seeds that were planted in that year are bearing some fruit this year with the economy and the optimism numbers, the unemployment numbers. Did you ever think that maybe the book felt a little incomplete without including some of those things, like an addendum of sorts? Oh,
well, you can't do an addendum about events that haven't happened. And this book goes really up to the spring, but on the economic issues, you've read the book, you know there is a fierce battle going on in the Trump White House about whether we should have steel tariffs, for instance, whether we should have any of these tariffs. And there are a lot of people, including I think about 99.9% of the economists, that say tariffs really don't work. They are unnecessary. The president, as you know, is...
And you say in the book, like, he's had these views for a long time, and Gary Cohn and the president go back and forth on this a lot. But if the economy, because yesterday the White House said that this is durable, the economy is strong and it could last another couple of years. If that is true and elections are based on the economy, do you think the president is on his way to re-election?
Well, we'll see. One of the things you learn doing this 47 years is try not to report on the future.
All right. Bob Woodward, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.